Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast, podcast number 334. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, October 14th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Last week's podcast raised a bit of controversy. I entitled it, Boomers Equal the Greatest Generation. And I probably should have put a question mark at the end of that because it was more of a question than a statement, more of an opinion than a fact. But I do believe that the boomers are the greatest generation. That's my opinion. You may or may not agree with it. I've had emails and Facebook posts and Twitter posts telling people that, you know what, you're wrong, but they made for a good conversation. So a good back and forth. So much so that I'm going to go ahead and build on that last podcast with today's podcast. Today's essay is entitled, Do Great Times Equal a Cloudy Tomorrow? And what I mean by that is, look, everybody has trials and tribulations they go through, so I'm not trying to be Pollyanna thinking that nobody has problems in this world. But if you look at the big picture, for most people, these may be the best times that I've ever lived in anyway. I mean, these are fantastic times right now if you look at what's going on in this country. I can't speak for the rest of the world. Of course, individuals have different problems, of course, but when it comes to financial freedom, freedom of any type, where you need to live, how to get a job, everything's pretty doggone good. Now, the only negative to that, I think, could be the fact that most people, especially most Americans, are kind of like, what have you done for me today? In other words, good enough never is. In other words, if today is good, tomorrow has to be better. And you get to the point where you may be about as good as it's going to get. Maybe. And we'll talk about that in today's essay. And that may be the case. It may not be the case. I'll bring up a couple of points, a couple of reasons that maybe today are the best times that we've ever had. That's not to say that the ship is now sinking. But as I've always said, things change. We always live in interesting times. If you don't like the way things are, be patient because they will change, and they are changing. Some people will adapt, some will not. Some will benefit more than others. But that's today's essay. Do great times equal a cloudy tomorrow? And I did put a question mark after it this time, so please, dear listeners, don't lose your minds. Little bit about the week I had before we go into today's essay. I was in Nashville this week. Actually, I flew into Nashville, but I was in Kentucky and Tennessee on business this week. A beautiful part of the country. A whole lot like East Central Missouri, where I live. Maybe a little bit warmer, a little bit nicer, a little bit more, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to use the word progressive because I don't like that word because it has a negative connotation. By progressive, I mean it's newer. There seems to be a better economy. The people seem to smile a little bit more. Maybe the weather was a little bit warmer and there was a little bit more sun than I'm used to having. So maybe that's why it looks a little cleaner and smarter and happier. But the planes to and from Nashville were not packed. I can't remember the last time I flew on planes that were not packed both ways. BNA, that's the Nashville airport. It's a great airport if you've ever flown into it. It's new, it's clean, it's modern, it's easy to get around in. And they had guitar players in the airport, which is, I guess this is Nashville. So of course you're going to have guys with cowboy hats playing for money in the airport. And it was kind of cool. I kind of liked it. Good coffee. The restaurants there didn't stick it to you. On the way home, I had a bit of an upset stomach, so I really didn't want to eat, but I wanted a cup of coffee. So I thought, okay, I'll pay the $5 for a bad cup of coffee in an airport. They didn't have Starbucks in that airport, which that's more of a trend. I don't see Starbucks in every airport, but they had a local coffee, and sometimes the local brand is, not that good. This time was the exception, though. Unfortunately, I forget the name of the place, but it was a place where I got a nice large coffee for like $3.50, which you think to yourself, that's a lot of money for a coffee. Well, it was a big coffee. It was just a black coffee, but it was a very good coffee. Normally, something like that costs you $5 or $6 at an airport. It was close to half that, and it was really good. I like the BNA airport. It made the whole trip it makes the whole trip a little bit better when you go into an airport that doesn't stink, isn't crowded, isn't dirty. The bathrooms, you can actually get in and out of them without bumping into people. It makes any travel, especially business travel, that more palatable. A new technology I've stumbled upon too. And when it comes to technology, those that know me know that there's a lot of things I do pretty well. Some things I don't do that great. I think when it comes to technology, I would rate myself as a solid 5. Not great, not horrible, but certainly not great. There's a new technology with Southwest Airlines. It's a bag check. You can go in, you actually can check your bags online. I thought, well, this is stupid, because normally when you do all this, when they want you to do all this stuff online in an automated fashion, it doesn't work. This one did. You go in, you click something, how many bags you want, click. How much you, and you just, it's just, after a few clicks, you've got everything done. And I think, okay, fine, I've done this work, so now I just go and do it all over again, which is how most of these technologies work. They take up about 2 or 3 minutes of your time, and then when you go to save time and automation, you just do it over again. In other words, you've done it twice. Or you got to sign in with your dopey password, which you don't know. You have to look it up, and it's stupid. This wasn't that way. Because I already had the app open, because I already had my boarding pass open, I could just click and go from there. They already had my information. They didn't want me to enter it in again. That's a plus. Also, when I'm done, they said, okay, now all you have to do is walk up to a kiosk, scan your boarding pass the same way they check it they scan it at the check-in gate, and it prints out your boarding pass at the little kiosk. And guess what, folks? It worked. I scanned it. They said, hey, has anything changed? You say no, and bang, the tags come out. You put them on your bag. You walk up. You give them to the attendant. You're done. So a technology that actually worked, an automated process that really does save you time and effort. Kudos to Southwest Airlines for doing that. Now, why did I spend so much time on this? Because the anti-automation that I ran into this week was from, I hesitate to say that they're the worst of all the medical companies I work with. I do a lot of help with my father because he doesn't hear well. That's being kind. So I do a lot of his planning and scheduling for his medicines and his doctor's appointments. But Walgreens may be the worst. And next week it'll be somebody else, because somebody else will screw it up worse than Walgreens. The quick automation story or lack of automation story with Walgreens is like anybody else. When you're out of a prescription and you go to call them up for a renewal, you can't talk to a person. That can be okay if it works. So you go through this whole rigmarole. They want you to, I understand the HIPAA thing, the name, the birth date, the address, all that kind of stuff. I get that. Okay. You enter all that information in. They then want you to enter in the prescription. So you enter in the 25-digit number on the prescription. Then it says, hey, is it really this? Yes. Do you want a refill? Yes. Is it new? No. Is it a doctor? Yes. Okay. You do all this. Okay. Then the automated attendant comes on and says, normally we would contact you with a pharmacist, with the pharmacy now, but they're on a lunch break. So call back later. Click. I get the whole lunch break thing. I think it's ridiculous, but okay. Why didn't you tell me that at the beginning? Why did you make me go through 5 minutes of baloney just to tell me, yeah, call back later? Of course, I called back later. Went through the whole nut roll again. This time they said, we'll now connect you to the pharmacy. I got the pharmacy. And here's the thing that chafes me the worst. You know what they did in the pharmacy? On the phone, asked me every single question I had already entered in 2 times before. So this is the 3rd time I'm doing this. Word of advice to Walgreens or anybody who wants to do this automated attendant thing. If you're going to ask the same questions again, just let somebody pick up the phone and ask the questions. You saved no time on your part, 0 time on your part, because the attendant asked me the same questions I had to enter in manually on the phone, okay? The exact same questions. No different. You wasted my time. You just wasted my time. And that seems to be the way it is with the medical profession. They're the absolute worst, in my opinion. So Walgreens, get your stuff together, please. But going back to Southwest Airlines, they did it right. How can an airline do it right, and the biggest pharmaceutical company, drug company in the United States do it wrong? It's hard to say. The other thing about this week that was just a very pleasant surprise was the car that I had. Now, I generally rent from Enterprise because I rent cars here in the St. Louis area for local use and when I'm on the road. I like the way Enterprise works normally. Sure, they have bumps and problems like anybody else, but for the most part, they're okay. And every now and then, they really do redeem themselves. If you've not noticed, the price of rental cars has gone through the roof. Once upon a time, I could rent a car for 4 days for about $200. Now it's close to $400. And the car that I rented was a Toyota Corolla or similar. So I'm not exactly out there renting E-Class Mercedes, okay? But Toyota Corolla or similar for 4 days, it was going to be close to $400. But that's what it costs. They all cost the same. They all cost that much. But I got off the plane, went to the rental car counter. Actually, I did my check-in online, and Enterprise is another one that you got to go through a lot of dopey steps. But here's the thing. It does save you a bunch of time, especially those times when you go to the counter and you're 17th in line, okay? You can do it all online, walk out to the kiosk and pick up your own car. So they do make you enter your account number and password, which I think is stupid because they've already got that because I've made a reservation, but they want you to enter it again. All right, fine. Make me do double work, but still, you do save time. But I went out to the kiosk and the lady greeted me and she said, yeah, we don't have any cars. I said, you do look like you're a little bit thin. She says, no, we don't have any cars, but can I give you a truck? And I said, nah, you can't give me a truck. I don't want a truck. So she said, okay. And we walked over to the exotic aisle. Yeah, the one with the supercars. And she tried to give me a Toyota, what is that, GR13? That's probably not right. It's a Toyota GR something or another. It's not the GT. At first I thought, oh, this is a Toyota GT. This is great. Nah, that's a Nissan GT, so it's not the same thing. It's a GR. It's the old Scion. If you remember the Toyota Scions that they don't make anymore, they had a sporty model that they did keep that model, but they turned it into a Toyota. Super looking car, super fast looking, sporty. And I thought to myself, I could take this and have a lot of fun. But then I thought to myself, yeah, but I have to be driving a lot. And this is going to be a lot of fun for probably the first 100 miles or 200 miles. And then my butt's going to get sore, my back's going to get sore, and I'm going to wish that I didn't have this tiny car. So I said, nah, this isn't going to work. So she takes me over to a BMW X2. That worked. Friends, that was a fantastic vehicle. I enjoyed it. It was fast. It was quick. It was roomy. It was very comfortable. I drove hundreds and hundreds of miles, and my butt never got sore. My back never got sore. What's the old moniker for BMW, the ultimate driving machine? It kind of was. Had a great time, a great car. It was fast, good gas mileage, a 2.8-liter intercooled turbo engine, and The BMW X2 made me smile this week for the price of a Toyota Corolla or similar. Okay, let's go into today's essay. Do great times equal a cloudy tomorrow? To segue into the meat of the argument, the meat of the essay, I guess I should say, one of my most favorite pastimes and it still is, but I don't partake like I used to, and that's in drinking. I still enjoy a good cocktail, a good beer, a good wine. Unfortunately, as we get older, let me rephrase that. Unfortunately, as I get older, my body stopped tolerating alcohol. And I can't drink like I used to. I still like it, but if I do it, I pay for it. Once upon a time, one of my favorite cocktails of all was a Negroni or a Manhattan. And I would have 2 doubles before dinner. And then I wouldn't sleep that night. So I talked to the doctor about it. Hey, what's the deal? They said, well, how much are you drinking before dinner? I said, just 2 cocktails before dinner, then a glass of wine with dinner. Okay, well, what do you have? I say a Negroni or a Manhattan. Okay. A Negroni is an ounce of gin, an ounce of Campari, and an ounce of vermouth, sweet vermouth. And I'll have a double and 2 of those. And the doctor says, that's 12 ounces of alcohol. Then you have a glass of wine with dinner? I said, yeah, a glass of wine or 2. He said, that's too much. That's why you can't sleep. So I backed off, and sure enough, I slept much better. While I do enjoy drinking, I enjoy sleeping more. Drinking is something I enjoy doing. Sleeping is something I need to do. So I drink a whole lot less than I used to. But I still enjoy a cocktail. And here is a way that I've kind of gotten around it, to make getting older just a little bit more palatable. Non-alcoholic beer. And you think to yourself, near beer, I've tried that stuff, it's horrible. Well, you know what? Once upon a time that was true. But not anymore. And I'm not the only one that thinks that, because sales of non-alcoholic beers are soaring, especially in this country. Why? Simple. Improved quality and taste. And general shifts in the drinking culture, especially by younger people. Now, shoppers in the beer aisle are encountering an increasing variety of non-alcoholic beers. Some from the craft brewers, but Heineken makes one, Budweiser makes one, Corona makes one, Guinness makes one. And I've tried them all. They're all really good, folks. Some better than others, but they're all really good. In fact, here in the U.S., overall beer sales, hard seltzer, alcoholic cider, all that kind of stuff, it spiked during the first year of the pandemic, but basically it stayed stagnant since then. By contrast, U.S. sales of non-alcoholic beer up 32% from a year earlier. Okay? That's a lot, folks. 32%. Now, besides an increased focus on health and wellness among consumers, the growth of this category also reflects canning, marketing, and positioning by beer makers. In fact, some suppliers have gotten smart, and they say, hey, somebody wants to feel like they're still part of the drinking crowd, but they're not drinking. In other words, happy hour without the alcohol. And these beers really do allow for that. They taste good, and they let you have a drink, a social thing, without all the alcohol. And these products just aren't aimed at teetotalers. In fact, a Nielsen IQ data survey showed a vast majority of non-alcohol beer buyers also buy alcohol. Some of them, they say, just might want to be moderating their drinking. And that's kind of with me. Instead of a cocktail or a couple of beers before dinner and then wine with dinner, I'll have 1 or 2 non-alcoholic beers for happy hour before dinner. Then I get have my wine at dinner, and life is good. I still get the beer, I still get the wine, I don't have the alcohol, and I sleep at night. And that, my friends, to me, is a big deal. If I don't sleep, I can't function. Once upon a time, I could get by on 5 or 6 hours a night of sleep. Can't do that anymore. I've got to have my full 8. Yeah, I go a night or two with just 5 or 6 or 7 hours maybe. But if I don't get my sleep, the computer needs to be rebooted. If I go 2 nights with just 5 hours worth of sleep, my computer the computer in my brain just isn't slow. I get the blue screen of death. I can't function. But the beer makers, in addition to making this stuff taste really good, and again, I've tried the Guinness, I've tried the Corona, I've tried the Budweiser, I've tried the Heineken. They're all really good. The Heineken might be the best. The Budweiser is maybe the second best. But I tend to drink the Budweiser because the can is bigger and it costs less. So it tastes almost as good and you get more for your money. So there you go. That's kind of the way I roll. But they've also done marketing surveys, and they've targeted just not the beer drinkers, but soft drink drinkers. And I found myself doing this as well. I'll spend the afternoon working in the garage on the old Jaguar, and I'll come home and I'm thirsty, a little bit hungry, and I don't want anything alcoholic because my stomach is empty, but I'll have a non-alcoholic beer. It's a little bit filling. It's very refreshing. It tastes better. There's little or no sugar, and it tastes good. So this non-alcoholic beer is just not replacing beer, but it's replacing tea and soda. Okay? Now, the big non-alcoholic beer craze, it started in Europe, okay? Non-alcoholic beer here in the U.S. is just about 1% of total beer sales, okay? It's not a big deal. In Europe, it's almost 6%. Western Europe we're talking about. Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, etc. Almost 6%. Now, the other thing that helps is this newest generation. And we keep talking about these generations, okay? Because all generations are a little bit different. The latest generation of non-alcoholic beer drinkers, they like the non-alcoholic beer because they like the taste of beer, but they don't want the alcohol, okay? And it tastes just as good. And why are they doing this? Why are the younger people not drinking beer like we used to? A couple of reasons. They still want to socialize, but maybe they don't socialize like they used to. Gen Z people don't really socialize like you and I, okay? They socialize online and on the phone. That's not exactly a social event that leads itself to drinking. They also drink less. And on the outside, you think, well, that's good. It's good that they're drinking less because even though it's fun to drink lots of booze, it has a detrimental effect. So the younger people are doing a different way, a better way, right? Well, yes and no. They're drinking less beer because they're smoking more pot. Pot is legal just like beer. So if your head's already spinning from the pot, maybe you don't want it spinning double fast from the alcohol. So they tend to drink the non-alcoholic beer. Now, what does that have to do with us living in great times? Well, think about it. If you like the taste of beer, if you like social drinking, once upon a time, you had to get blitzed if you wanted to go ahead and have happy hour and dinner, alcohol at dinner too, because the near beer was just awful. It's not awful anymore. In fact, folks, it's actually pretty doggone good. So technology has enabled me to have happy hour and wine with dinner and sleep well at night. Kudos to technology. That's the segue into today's essay. Do great times equal a cloudy tomorrow? Now, once upon a time, do you remember a radio talk show host in St. Louis named Jim White, the Big Bumper? Jim White was on KMOX at night, okay? And he made a statement one time years and years ago that I disagreed with, and as it came to pass, he was actually wrong. And he said, this was back in the 70s, 80s, probably the 1980s, maybe the 90s, 80s or 90s. He said, look, my generation has it better than my kids are going to have it. In fact, Mine is the first generation where the next generation is not going to have it better in this country. And he was wrong, because my generation has it better than his generation, and I see the generation of my children having it better than me. Now, that may or may not mean monetary, but it means a whole lot of other things. We continue to get better. Times continue to get better. That's through technology. That's through social programs, social awareness, whereas we look at we look at one another as equals, not as different colors and different ethnicities. We just see one another as equals. As I mentioned with the whole greatest generation thing, some of the kickback I got was, no, the greatest generation was better than the boomers. Really? Yeah, the 1950s were better than modern times. I said, really? Maybe that's true if you were white. If you were black, not so much. Black folks, today, black people can do anything that white people could do. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. You have the opportunity to do whatever you want. It wasn't that way in the 50s. If you were black, you couldn't have certain jobs. You couldn't live in certain places. Things were different. So I say things are better now because everybody can share. Whereas in the 1950s into the 60s, everybody could not share the good times. So that's why I say the boomers are the greatest generation. Maybe the Gen Xers or Gen Z or Gen fill in the blank will change that. Actually, I hope they do. But the only downside to living in fantastic times is, how do you get it better? Because that's why we're wired. That's the way people are wired. Good enough never is. What's the next step? How do I improve on what I have? And you may get to the point where, I'm not going to say you can't improve on what you have, but it becomes very difficult to improve on what you have. Case in point, across the country, people, they want better jobs. They want bigger homes. They want nicer gyms. This is an article out of the Wall Street Journal. But making any of these leaps right now could leave them worse off financially in the long run. Now, low interest rates, high salaries, and gym memberships soared before and during the pandemic, and they often can't be matched today. In fact, they give people golden handcuffs with their jobs, their houses, and their gym memberships. Now, some people who job shop when the labor market was at its tightest, they negotiated hefty raises or work from home arrangements or things like that. Homeowners, if you want to buy a bigger, better house, well, right now they've got a mortgage rate that's under 3%. And the new mortgage rates are 7%. So these people are likely to they may never ever see sub 3% mortgages again. So you're kind of stuck in your house. Gym memberships, the same way. Gym memberships have soared in the past year, but you've been grandfathered in. My gym membership, the gym membership I have right now is at Club Fitness. I got that gym membership, about 20 years ago. Okay. It was $10 a month 20 years ago. 20 years later, it's $10 a month. It hasn't gone up. Okay. New gym memberships are a whole lot more, but I'm grandfathered in. Okay. Now, while economists say the constant pursuit of new and better opportunities is a sign of a strong economy, it can also fuel inflation, which is what happened. Businesses paid premium for talent in recent years, and workers helped drive up home prices and car prices and other goods because they had the money and they bought stuff. Now, that caused inflation. And as the Federal Reserve tries to stamp out inflation by raising interest rates, many consumers now have less buying power, and they're just holding on to what they have, their houses and their cars. In fact, that's what the Fed is trying to do. In fact, that's the point of raising interest rates. That's according to Dana Peterson. He's the chief economist at the Conference Board. That's a business research for a nonprofit organization. And if people continue to feel stuck, even after the Fed eventually lowers rates, that would be cause for worry. Now, home sales, let's start with that. Home sales are now mirrored in the worst slump in more than a decade, and workers are quitting job at a rate that's really slowed. In other words, they're keeping their houses, they're keeping their jobs. Now, pessimistic Americans are driving the same old cars, living in the same old houses, and working in the same old job that they've had now for a year or two or three or four. In fact, the average age of cars and light trucks in the U.S., the average age is 12 and a half years. Cars are about 13 years. That's right. The average age of cars in this country is 13 years old. Okay? Now, why is that? Well, Kelley Blue Book reports new vehicle sales have plateaued at 25% above pre-pandemic levels, and inventory shortages persist, stalling some trade-ins. And the price of cars, if you look at them, people are just driving what they have. If you go to trade in for a new cars are expensive, and the interest rate is unbelievable. So they're driving the cars that they already have and they're already paid for. Now, in matters big and small, people feel they cannot improve on their current situations. They're mentally or emotionally ready for a change, but they can't convince themselves to walk away. In fact, it's very hard to tell whether the grass is greener, says Justin Sousa. He's a software engineer in Massachusetts. In fact, in more than 6 years at his company, Sousa periodically craved the new challenges and entertain new offers. He says his employer always countered poaching attempts and gave him more money or more bonuses, so he kept them. Now, the promise of another headhunter dangling a raise never felt so far off, because now the tech sector has a bunch of layoffs. In other words, people used to offer him new jobs all the time for more money. His boss matched those offers. Now the jobs have stopped coming in because the tech sector is not as hot as it used to be. Sousa doesn't really care for his job, but he can't leave because he can't get more money elsewhere. So Sousa, he's only 36, but he's standing pat. He figures a job change now would be just a lateral move. So why would you want to go someplace else for a lateral move unless you hate your current job? Sousa says he doesn't hate his current job, but why would I just move? It's the devil you know. Sure, I'd like to go someplace else, but I need more money. Why would you go someplace else for the same money? Okay. Jumping ship is usually the best way to earn more money, but job switchers' wage growth advantage over those who hang around is the smallest in 3 years, 0.4%. That's all you get when you change jobs now. And that's according to ZipRecruiter. Okay. Now, for those who are locked into favorable positions, they won't get much sympathy from others either. Okay. People hoping to, for not just jobs, but houses. People hoping to buy houses for the first time have limited options when existing owners can't afford to trade up from their starter homes. Ambitious workers can find themselves blocked from promotions if people above them don't move on. So there's not much starter housing available because those people aren't leaving. There's not much room for promotion because the guy ahead of you isn't leaving the job either. Okay. Fewer innovations spring from startups would be entrepreneurs opt to play it safe in their current job. Applications for forming new businesses dropped in August. Okay. Usually it raises, but again, people are standing pat. Now, for many, things haven't necessarily taken a turn for the worse. Rather, their grip is slipping on a piece of the American dream, the feeling that something better is achievable. So it's not that what they have sucks. In fact, what they have is real good. In fact, what they have may be so good that they're having trouble finding something better. Many homeowners feel trapped by their low mortgage rates. For instance, there's a guy named John D'O'Brien. He's looking to make the most of the modest house that he feels stuck in. D'O'Brien is a 44-year-old early retiree in South San Francisco. Now, first of all, how do you feel sorry for a guy who's 44 years old and retired? You talk about good times. Yeah, I'm 44 years old and retired, and I'm having troubles. No, you're not. Life is really good if you're 44 and retired, okay? But he wants a bigger house, okay, because he wants to invite his parents, who are 78 and 83. They live in India. He wants to move his parents over from India into a house, okay? But he can't because he has a 3.3% mortgage. So what did he do? He built a 300 square foot guest house in the backyard. He says his parents can elect to move and they can live in the guest house, okay? But he couldn't sell his house because he looked at a good house, and the average fixed rate mortgage for 30 years is 7.57%. Compare that to his 3.3% mortgage. He can't do it. So he's staying pat. In fact, findings suggest that people with a 3% mortgage today could be about 30 to 40% likely to move than they otherwise would be. Okay, that's according to the Pennsylvania Wharton Institute School. Okay, now when homeowners don't move, that limits the number of houses that are bought and sold. That makes sense. Cars are the same way. If people are driving their cars for almost 13 years before they're selling them, and they finally trade them in after 13 years, friends, a 13-year-old car is not something you can really depend on for the most part, okay? Now, getting into gym memberships. Now, you think to yourself, I'm not a gym person, but consider this. A lot of people are. Take the case of Mario Moretta. His monthly gym membership in New York City, remember I told you I pay $10 a month. His monthly gym membership in New York City is $85 a month. He was grandfathered in because if he joined that gym today, $200 a month. $200 a month to join a gym. He'd like to change gyms, but he's grandfathered in at $85 a month. He says, I'm getting what I paid for, says Moretta, who's a 29-year-old finance manager at a retail store. It's not meant for me to go to the spa every day, okay? So I just have this crappy gym that only costs $85 a month. And that's my reasoning behind the great times we live in. And they can, in theory, cause a cloudy tomorrow. Because if you're looking to improve yourself, and most are, okay, especially younger people. I remember back in the day when I was in my 30s, you're always looking for the better thing. In fact, my mantra has always been good enough never is, okay? I'm starting to, I'm not going to say change that, but change what's good and what's not. Once upon, good enough never is means you're not making enough money. But then when you have enough where you don't need to spend an exorbitant amount of effort to try to earn more, but do other things, then things change just a little bit. So you're trying to make things a little bit better, but when you're younger, that better, I believe, is more geared towards monetary better because you've got to sock money away for when you get too old to work, okay? Everybody wants to retire or at least slow down. And how do you do that? You bank money, okay? Because Social Security ain't going to cut it. Social Security is fine. Social Security is wonderful. But if you're going to expect to live the life of Riley on only Social Security, you're in a dream world. But that's my argument that we do live in great times because people are having trouble getting something better than they already have. I've got a great job that pays a ton of dough that I don't hate, and I can't find a better one. I live in a fantastic house with a mortgage that's 3% or less. Or I don't have a mortgage. The house is paid off. Do I upgrade and pay over 7% mortgage rate? I have a car that runs just fine and is paid for, but it's 10 years old. Do I keep driving it, or I look at the new shiny, pretty one? The new gym membership, the new gym they just opened down the street with the glamour and the glitz and the smoothie bar and everything else. Do I want to go ahead and join that for $50 a month? I'm paying $10 a month now. Part of the indicator that we live in good times is that if you look at your life right now and you can't do much better, but you're living high on the hog right now, friends, those are good times. And I go back to the guy who lives in South San Francisco that's 44 years old and retired and wringing his hands because the mortgage rate on a house he can't afford. Again, he's 44 years old and retired, okay? And he's living in South San Francisco. He's not living in Biloxi, Mississippi, all right? He's living in a really high-end place. 44 and retired. Friends, we really do live in great times. Tomorrow will be better. But for right now, maybe today is just fine. Well, that's it. I'm done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. You want to subscribe to the podcast? It's not really a subscription. You just send me an email. Say, hey, dope, I want to listen to your podcast on a regular basis. Why don't you send me a link when it's done, and I can click on it and download it and listen to it at my leisure. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the address. Share with your friends, too. I'd appreciate it. That's it. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.